Hey everyone, welcome back to the Gut Girls podcast. We are so excited to be back with you for another episode. And this episode is all about just real life with the Gut Girls, some real life healing, some catching up between Diana and I, kind of how we stay connected from different states. So, kind of let's start there, Diana, before we dive into some real life with, Todd and Taylor, our husbands, and some things that we've discussed in earlier podcasts. Let's start. How are your girls? I know this is a transitional season going into school. So tell me how things are going.
Yeah, hey, it is a busy season. Man, I feel like we go from 0 to 100 so quickly right when school starts back. And here in Tennessee, or at least in Tullahoma, where I am, we actually started back July 31st. So it is very early, still like middle of the summer. And we literally go from 0 to 100, where it's after school curricular activities and all the different things. It's just so much trying to kind of keep everybody organized or anything or in everything. But JC Kate, my oldest, just turned 15. So actually, yesterday we went to the DMV and had to go through that whole process and take our whole lives with us to, for her to actually get her permit. And she ended up driving me home, and I'm pretty sure I had at least one heart attack and maybe two, because she tends to, we've practiced in parking lots and things, but it's just a whole different scenario when you're on the road and, passing other cars. And I feel like she tends to hug the right hand side. So I'm like, lifting up to the right, like, oh, 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 oh.
Sounds like you need a chiropractor.
I know. She's like, Mom, stop. And I'm like, JCK, like if we're about to hit a mailbox, I'm going to let you know,
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm screaming and hollering at her, but I think I make her nervous. So I try not to react, too strongly so that we don't overcorrect. But, anyway, she gets kind of giggly and it's funny. But I'm like, okay, we got to take this seriously. Like you're driving
Mhm.
down the road, she'll look down and only be going 21 miles an hour. And I'm like, the people behind her are just like right on our tail.
My goodness, what a season. I'm not there yet, so I can't imagine, but oh, I would say buckle up, right?
I know, exactly. Yeah, literally, right?
Yeah.
And Michaela's good. She's busy. She cheers for the football team and getting ready for a busy basketball season. And I posted on our stories the other morning that we just did a stool test for Michaela, and we're even going to do like a food sensitivity test. And she's she's 13, she's going to be 14, and just trying to make sure we keep her optimal. And that now I believe, and I know that that we believe that gut health is optimizing the gut is at the root of their health. And as their hormones are really starting to change and things as they're going through their teenage years, I really want to have a good baseline too. So we're going to do the stool test. And so I look forward to kind of sharing those results, with everybody here on the podcast.
So I'm curious hearing where your girls are at. What are some things that you're doing on the daily with them as they're transitioning into these big milestones in their lives, to keep them healthy? Even with, think of JC Kate driving. I just think of mental clarity, right? And I think of, I don't know, for me, I know I can drive and carry stress from work in my driving with me, and that can, steer me from, maybe paying attention here because my mind's there. Like, do you talk to them as young adults of like, okay, so you're behind you're behind the wheel, like you got to let everything else. Do you ever like, have you had that conversation yet or not yet?
Not so much about driving, but it is interesting that you say that. I mean, I did kind of tell her yesterday, I was like, we got to take this seriously. I mean, she's just kind of a giggly person, which is so fun.
Mhm.
But she laughs at herself and makes fun of herself, which is such a fun characteristic that she has. But um, I honestly do feel like she's really starting to kind of just get the lifestyle overall that I've been trying to adopt for our family. Is starting your day with protein. And I would say the majority of the days she does now. 2 years ago, it was like pulling teeth to get her to eat anything in the morning. And I'm at least getting her to eat some protein in the morning. She's not a caffeine drinker, which is great. She doesn't want, the cool Alani drinks and some of those things. And I think she understands that, those things are just temporary fixes, like for, your overall health. And she understands that energy comes from food. And, if she doesn't feel optimal, one of the first things that she goes to do is she drinks electrolytes. So really she's started to make sure that she is plenty hydrated. She stays after for band. And it's like I said a minute ago, it's still the middle of summer, so it's hot. And so she realizes if she has a headache that she's dehydrated, so she'll make sure she takes electrolytes and stuff. So some of those things we're already starting to do. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. As she kind of progresses and we start driving, during darker hours, especially, I don't, talking to her about driving tired and things like that. I definitely want to make sure that she is optimal. But it's kind of cool to see now that she's getting older and she's maturing, and we're starting to talk about college, and she's a sophomore in high school, so it's not too early to start having some of those conversations. And so it's neat to kind of see her and watch her really mature and grow up, and kind of come into her own and understand her body well, much better than she used to, where she knows when she doesn't feel good, and she knows what makes her when she does feel her best.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think you do such a good job with your girls. And I hope listeners take some of those little pieces of advice to plant the seeds early, right? Because you'll see them kind of come forth as they develop and continue to grow. So good job with that.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of starting early, I've kind of made a joke before about you starting early with your girls. And I mean, man, you have done a fantastic job, especially with their nutrition. I'm just so amazed at the things that they eat. And I think I've mentioned on the podcast, or at least on stories, about, your kids eating sardines and things like that, that just gives them some good, healthy protein and fats. And not most kids won't eat those kind of things. And so you're constantly trying to make sure that they are well nourished and boost their immune systems, because I believe Adeline started kindergarten, right? I got a picture of her going to kindergarten the other day. I love that you send me pictures, like that we send these pictures back and forth. We're just kind of doing life together, even though we live in different states, right?
Yes, it is a lot of fun, and I get to show the girls your girls. So, we got to sing JCK happy birthday. We get to see your child.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's actually so great for, speaking of Adeline, for her to have your girls to look up to, right? Like she knows, even Eloise, for y'all listening, Eloise calls Diana Diana. And so every time I'm listening to like a voicemail from Diana, Eloise is in the back seat going, Diana, Diana. I mean, it's adorable, but they love your family, and it's really good they get to see these girls. In fact, I'll get to Adeline in a second, but you were telling me something the other day with one of your girls, I won't mention a name, that you were going through and kind of struggling. And I actually shared that with Adeline, and she was like, "Wow, like so Diana, did this or did that because of something one of your girls had said or done." And I was like, "Yes, so you see, like everyone has to be shown discipline in this world, and like everyone like even with eating, like if Diana's girls don't eat right, like look how tall they are, like look at their sports, look at what they're accomplishing, so then she gets to look up to your girls, right? And so it's
Mhm.
really a healthy relationship that I think we've built from afar. But speaking of her first day yesterday, she was so excited, until she wasn't anymore. She she got off the first day. Getting her there, because she had no idea what to expect, was great. But getting off the bus, y'all will just laugh so hard. She barely walked herself home. She was exhausted. Her legs hurt her. And Taylor had to carry her from our couch to the dining room table to eat dinner last night. I mean, she was so exhausted. But here's what's interesting, you guys. So I packed her a great lunch, and she knows the deal of you're supposed to eat protein. Whatever I pack, you eat the protein first, and then you get to the other stuff. Like we have an order, right? In which you're to eat the stuff I pack. But yesterday, you all know how this is her first year at a public school, and they don't get a big lunch. And she's 5 years old. So she's not just housing her food down. I mean, even at home, the kitchen has to stay open for Adeline to eat her meal. Like it takes a decent amount of time for her to focus and get that meal eaten, right? So at school, they don't have a big lunchtime. So man, I open up her lunchbox and it is like completely full. And I was like, Adeline, okay, like I wasn't mad. I didn't like approach it like, Adeline, you didn't eat your lunch. I was just like, Adeline, I think I know why you're exhausted. And she was like, "Why, mama?" As she's sitting on the couch, and I was like, "Because you did not touch your lunch." Like, it goes, so then I just immediately go into like, this is how you get your energy. This is how, your brain doesn't start hurting or your stomach doesn't start hurting. And that's what she said to me yesterday. Like, my stomach was hurting, and she was like, I just didn't have enough time. And so she does have to adjust to the quicker schedule of school, but I don't see it as a failure. I don't see it as a disappointment. I see it as like another coaching opportunity, like connecting the dots for her.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's a coaching opportunity because they will tell you, I mean, still to this day, well, I think Michaela's lunchtime is at 10:30 a.m. And I mean, that's not that long. Our school didn't start till 8. So, I
Oh,
mean,
wow.
yeah. So, I mean, she's going to lunch like some people are just waking up for the day, So, and then they don't, I remember in elementary school, I think they do get a little bit more time as they get older, but in elementary school, it was like 22 minutes by the time they sit down. And of course, if they sit there and socialize with their friends for 3 or 4 minutes, yeah, it goes by really quickly. And I remember the girls being like, we just don't have enough time to eat. So and of course, obviously, as they've gotten older, they know like sit down and start eating,
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that's what I would say to you is like just tell her like, hey, you're gonna have to sit down and immediately and go ahead and start eating. And then if you get done, like use that more as your socializing time because it really goes by quickly. My girls always talked about that for lunchtime.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a great first day, and we're learning our stride, and that's just where we are in life, right?
Yeah.
So I'm glad we got to share that just to let people know like we're working through the real stuff too, and we're moms, and we're adjusting with our own families and trying to prioritize health and well-being. So on that note, let's dive into Todd, your husband, because I believe it was in our very first episode. We kind of talked about how he was recently diagnosed with a condition, and it was life changing for you all. And so he has gotten treatment, and so I believe where we left off was told us, okay, he got diagnosed with Rocky Mountain Spotted Fever, alpha gal, and he got his antibiotics, but then that was it. And so kind of fill us in on where he has been since. And then we even had some labs kind of come in. So, like, kind of walk that journey for other people that have also been diagnosed with alpha gal. I think this will be fascinating for them.
Yeah, one thing that I am so thankful that I have the so many more resources now available, including yourself and some other people that I've reached out to be able to dive a little bit deeper and not just accept the fact that his liver enzymes are still elevated, some of his blood counts are still very low. And it's like, okay, why is that? Let's take the deeper route and figure out what's going on. And so I'm so thankful that we ran even things like his copper level, and his copper level was actually very low. And so, one of the things that obviously we do and what we try to do for our clients in our membership and, as they go through the Optimize Your Gut program, it's like, okay, well, Todd needs copper, but he doesn't need more iron. And he has to take a vegetarian capsule. So we do the digging to find, him to have a multivitamin that has copper, which that not all of them do, and then that doesn't have iron. And it's vegetarian. And so we had to find that specific multivitamin. And I will tell you, between like him taking the multivitamin, he also has done the ozone IV therapy. and then he's doing 2 peptide injections every day. But he, in my mind, he looks as if he feels 100%. And if anything, I would almost say that his energy level seems back optimal, if not even better than before. Which that goes to tell you like how dialed in he has his nutrition, and then even just figuring out how to get to the root of and optimize his health, even given that his liver enzymes are kind of all over the place and his blood work's kind of all over the place, that he still feels optimal. In fact, a lot of times he's actually working out 2 times a day, and he feels like he can handle that, and not having any side effects or anything to it. So I'm just so grateful for how much better he's feeling at this point. So yeah, that's kind of what he's doing. That's his update.
Well, and so just to back up for a second too, I'm thinking about people listening. So first of all, there's actually a lot of people that don't even know what alpha gal is, right? And so we can talk about that for a second. So he got bit by a tick,
Mm-hmm.
and was diagnosed with this, and so it's triggered by the tick, and it basically can cause delayed allergic reactions to red meat and other um, mammal products, essentially. In short. Okay, so if you
Correct.
didn't
Yeah.
know what it yeah, so if you didn't know what it was, that's kind of the response to the specific, I guess, Lone Star tick bite, right?
Yeah. I was going to say Lone Star Tick. So that's the one that has the spot.
Yeah, yeah. And what was interesting is I remember talking to Todd when I was just at y'all's house not that long ago, and there was no bullseye rash, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Nope. We
And
did find the tick, and we actually found multiple ticks on him.
mhm,
And he had done the sprays that you sprayed on him. He actually had wrapped his pant. He had tucked his pants into his boots, wrapped his boots up with duct tape, and was doing everything that he could. But even after he came home, I was still picking ticks off of him, 8 hours later. And one thing that I do want to mention for people listening, if you do some research, a lot of times it says like the tick has to be on there for 18 to 24 hours before, like really kind of giving you this sugar molecule and blah blah blah. um and that's not true because it wasn't on that long. It was really probably only on for, I mean, probably not more than 8 to 10 hours, something like that,
mhm.
max.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, that's a scary, reality. But I remember too, when I was just at y'all's house, it wasn't that long after he had had the tick bite, and he does look. I mean, you wouldn't know. You're sitting there having a conversation with him. He looks just fine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now the biggest thing was though that you're still seeing in labs that he's not just fine, right? So that's what I think is so interesting is sometimes this happens for a lot of people and they get bit by a tick and they go take the antibiotics, and so okay, you, you're done, that's it, that's all we know, that's all we do, and it's like but there's more. So this extreme reaction in his body, I mean, it's still, the body's still trying to figure it out, it's still trying to level out. Like you said, his liver markers have been elevated for a while, they're slowly showing some progress of coming down, but it is taking time, which is to kind of help people wrap their head around why you guys did some of the treatments you did. My thought is you did the ozone to keeping his body in this progress of getting it out, right? Like we're doing ozone to help his body continue to detox what it can to bring the inflammation down. And so that's kind of additional um, resources that you sought beyond just the antibiotic to help his body continue to heal. And then he is taking some supplementation. Like you said, you got the blood work and it showed the low copper. You don't need iron because for other people listening, iron can just feed more inflammation and viruses and bacteria. So it's not like he needs more iron, he needed specifically copper. But I remember you and I were talking about this. So copper can mimic like this fatigue, right? Like this extreme fatigue when someone's low in copper. And it impacts. So copper actually is needed to make hemoglobin for oxygen delivery and white blood cells. So that's your immune defense. So low copper can show up as, like I said, anemia like fatigue and lowered immune resilience, which is common post infection. So, guys, we're kind of sharing this because we're not saying everyone's going to have the same reaction, but sometimes, you see post infection this white blood cell count that never comes back up, right? And this fatigue that it's like, well, your iron's fine. So, I don't know why you're still tired. You know what I mean? And again, we kind of just stop there, right, Diana? And people don't always continue to look because they don't know always what to look for, right? So
Right.
yeah. So
Yeah, I mean that's why I'm so thankful that you and I are like, wait, we're gonna keep going. We're gonna dig deeper
yeah,
because obviously his immune system took a hit, right? And we're like, okay, we're gonna do these ozone IV therapies and these peptide injections and some of those things to kind of boost his immune system, but it still takes time. I mean, that is it, and it's kind of even like some of our customers and clients in the Optimize Your Gut program, maybe they don't see results right away. And we're like, wait, you've been dealing with IBS and you've been having to sprint to the bathroom immediately after eating, for decades, sometimes
years.
multiple decades. Like sometimes we're talking 20 and 30 years where, people are having accidents in their pants because they can't even make it to the restroom, or having problems with that incontinence and things like that. So it's it's not, progress is not linear, and it's like it doesn't just happen overnight, so it does take time. We're not going to jump back into him trying to like eat beef and do some of those things, but we did kind of have a little bit of a, I would call it almost a hiccup, didn't I, Angela? I called you and I was like, oh no,
In a
pray.
panic, yeah.
I mean, I literally, Todd. So, of course, for you listeners, and most people that follow us on stories know that I'm a major food prepper. We have busy, busy weeks. So, we make sure that we are prepared with protein all the time. And Todd and I had made a family decision that the girls and I were going to continue to eat red meat, even if he could not. And so, we talked about the fact that, using different utensils and, things like that. If I'm making, turkey tacos for him and it's time for us to kind of have a rotation through some red meat or whatever, then we do ours with red meat. So I had prepared my ground beef and he was eating something else. So I was just reheating it. He picked up my fork, took a bite, and he literally looked at me and goes, oh no. And of course I looked at him and I was like, what happened? What'd you do? And he was like, I just ate that meat off your fork. And I was like, I, it took me back to that week when he was so sick and he slept about 23 out of 24 hours for 5 days straight. And it took me back to that moment that I mean, at one point he and I both, had the feeling that he may not make it, because we truly didn't know what was wrong with him and we couldn't figure out how to get him better. And it took me back to that moment when he was so sick. He had lost the 25 pounds and I just like almost pictured my life without him, because I was like, what is this going to be like, And so, I mean, I immediately started crying. I immediately prayed. I called you. I was like, start praying, that he doesn't have some kind of reaction to this, especially we can't go back to where we were before. And thankfully, he did not have a reaction to it. I mean, we're so grateful that his immune system obviously had gotten a big enough boost just for a short period of time for him to be able to handle that small amount of red meat. Um, but something you and I've kind of talked about is like, we're not ready for him to just jump in, and have that, start eating red meat all the time and think that he's just well, because just like I was saying, we can't stop there. We know that he still has that immune system response that is very low, and we can't stop at that point.
Yeah, and it takes me back to a lot of our clients that do have alpha gal, and the the reactions can be unpredictable, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Todd's reaction may not be the next person's reaction. And here's why. So alpha gal is typically an immediate immune response. So the onset, I remember when you called me when that happened and you were like, well, we're not going to know for another maybe what, 4, 6 hours.
Well, yeah, I was like, pray for us over the next 4 to 6 hours because I guess we'll see what happens,
Yeah. So that's an immediate immune response, is like within that, 4 to 6 hours after happening, not 5 days later, but like within four to
Right.
six hours. So that's a typical way that alpha gal is expressed rather than an accumulation. Okay. So some exposures, they don't trigger symptoms like you saw. Maybe it's depending on the amount. Or I've even looked it up, the cooking method, or the immune variability, meaning like just where Todd's immune system was that day. So this is what I wanted to point out too, is typically people with alpha gal don't just suffer from alpha gal. There's other things. And so that immune response, I want to back up for a second and say, prior to this incident with Todd getting this diagnosis, if you guys listen to Diana's, entire story in earlier episodes, yes, it was Diana's story, but it wasn't. It was Diana's family story, because Todd was along for the ride with you. I mean, he changed his entire diet. So I have to point out, Todd's gut has been healed now for a long time. He walked beside you every step of the way, and you guys lived the life. So then to get this diagnosis of alpha gal, I truly believe Diana did not wreck him because he started on a higher note. Okay, so now you have, let's say, someone else who doesn't even know that they shouldn't be drinking sodas. You know what I mean? That just is living the entire standard American way of living,
Yeah, like a very inflammatory diet life. Yeah.
very inflamed. Then you get, this diagnosis, and then you eat off of the fork. There might be this whole immune reaction happening from the inflammation of just your diet alone. Then you get, the bite off of your fork, and it just emphasizes and takes off. And that's where you might have a reaction versus Todd didn't. Right. So this still goes back to, I believe strongly, our Optimize Your Gut program, where it's like these types of things are going to happen in life because that's just how life is. And so, why not give your body the best ability to handle whatever life is going to throw your way? And I do believe the reason I was sitting there when I visited you guys and Todd looked completely normal, happy as can be, still getting up early as all get out. He was not there in the mornings. Yeah, he was gone before I woke up, and I'm an early person, and he wasn't getting home till late, and still working out. That's the reason he could do that.
I
Where
absolutely believe so
Yeah.
too. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, at this point, I feel like for the most part, we still, our lives have gone on pretty normally, except for a little bit of fear still around the food, right?
Mhm.
So, I made a joke to somebody the other day. They were like, where do you go when you eat out? And I was like, well, it's August and we haven't really eaten out since May 24th. So,
Wow.
I have a couple of times. And so, but Todd in general really hasn't eaten out since then. So there still definitely is some fear around food, but it's not even fear. It's a choice to make sure that he is trying to do everything and continue to boost his immune system. And when the time is right, then we'll work our way once the blood work kind of looks better and, the stool tests and everything kind of all align again. Then, maybe he does start the reintroduction. A lot of times, I actually talked to a friend the other day that she had alpha gal, and it's been, my guess is based on what she said, it's probably been 6 or 7 years ago. And she said, I didn't really know what was going on with me. And then, she finally figured out what it was after a long period of time, which again, so thankful that we figured it out quickly. Right.
Yeah.
But she had figured it out after a long time. And she said one day she kind of did like Todd, and this was years and years later. She said, I accidentally, ate something, and she was like, I didn't have a reaction. And so then I tried it again and I didn't have a reaction, and so she just kind of gradually, but it was years later. She said for many years, she really couldn't even be around it at all. And so I do feel very hopeful that we have kind of boosted his immune system enough to where, maybe that reintroduction does happen quicker than what most people experience. So yeah, I mean, that's Todd. I feel so thankful for how he's feeling, how he's doing, especially compared to, those days in May and leading into June was just absolutely terrifying. But I'm so thankful that we have the resources and we can wrap our heads around that, a little bit better and understand the diet and all those things. And so if that's you and or your husband or your friend or whatever, like please reach out to us. We do feel like we've kind of educated ourselves as much as we possibly can. Even more so, we had never really gone through the tick bite thing, but now it's Todd even says maybe for a reason, that we kind of understand this and we kind of learn to understand the body even in a different way, like I said, even with the copper levels and learning about the ozone IV therapies and some of those different things so that we can help be a resource for not only our clients, but our clients' families and things so that they can come to us when those things happen. But I do want to shift gears because we've talked a lot about Todd and kind of his elimination diet and everything. And one of the things that you sort of left us on was an elimination diet for Taylor and what he was experiencing, with some of his skin rashes and things like that. So I want to kind of shift gears and talk about Taylor a little bit too, because I know people are interested in that gut skin reaction, especially because if you missed our episode of where we had Rebecca Layton on, she talked about the gut skin reaction and or the gut skin connection and those kind of things. And so I want you to talk a little bit more about how Taylor's doing with his skin rash and his elimination diet and everything.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in. We actually were chatting last night a little bit after we got the girls down because of course Adeline we didn't even have to work to get her to bed last night.
She's like, I'm going to bed. She puts herself to bed, right?
Yeah. And it was funny because Taylor and I looked at each other and we're like, oh my goodness, we're actually sitting here alone for once.
Oh, that kind of
Um,
is nice that y'all got your a little bit of alone time. She was tired enough to just go to sleep.
go to sleep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he would say he's about 50% better. So it's a process. And so I'll kind of share with you if you don't remember. So Taylor has like this, I would call it a rash. It comes and goes and it's patchy. It's slightly, I'm talking slightly raised, but not much. And it kind of gets worse in the heat. And so, he's had it for a while, but he finally decided he was ready to do something about it. And so we had, a few months ago where the girls were out of town. And so he was able to do a full elimination diet, not worry about, cooking for the family. It was just, I'm doing a hardcore elimination diet, he said. So I was like, go for it. And so he ate just meat and fruit. So, I mean, he took a hardcore just elimination diet, which we don't really do that in our Optimize Your Gut program, but he wanted to get to the root fast. And that is one way to do it. And so honestly, it was almost gone. I mean, I have some pictures of it, at the end of the first week. It was truly like, wow, you could see it, but you almost had to look at it in a certain way of the light to see where it ended and
Wow.
yeah, like to see where it started and stopped. You had to like really kind of put a light on it. That's how much it was starting to improve. Um, and so here's what's interesting though. So I'm actually sharing this and he totally is fine with it. To people that go through this process, because okay, that week was great, right? When he could really just eat just this, and that was not a busy week for us in life. Like it was kind of like a little bit of a reprieve from being a mom and dad because our girls were out of town. So it was a really light load week, right? So he got to get all in and he got some improvement, but then the girls came back and life happened and stress kind of triggered back on. And Taylor travels a lot for his job, so he can be gone all day long. So he has to pack his food, right? And if it's not packed, he has to stop and eat somewhere or grab something. So meal prepping for him is crucial, right? And so you guys know that when busy seasons hit, sometimes we skip the meal. Like it's just like, oh my gosh, I forgot to plan this meal. And so one of the big things that he saw is nuts and seeds trigger him. And this is an interesting concept because a lot of people would be like, why nuts and seeds are so healthy. So Diana, I think this is so cool because we hear this a lot of the times when people are like, but I'm doing everything right, so like why am I still having my symptoms? Well, Taylor has a gut, and I've done a stool test on him. It's a little bit too old to treat based on it. Like it's a year old. So we don't treat on, actually, we don't treat in general, but like we don't educate around tests that are that old. The gut microbiome shifts so fast, right? And so looking at his test from a year ago, it was like, well, your stomach acid was very low. And when you add a bunch of nuts and seeds, those are hard to digest, right? Like that's a
Mm.
lot of fiber,
Well, and
fat.
especially even a lot of times people don't even just chew well enough, right, to digest them.
Exactly. And then here's the whole other part about nuts and seeds is we've mentioned this before. I don't know if we've done it on the podcast, but how those things are transported and stored, right? So like you have a nut that has been, shipped to our grocery store from who knows where and sitting, in however they're being contained, right? Where they're very prone to mold. Very
Mm,
prone to mold. Like so nuts and seeds can be very problematic. They're very high histamine, certain nuts. So we know that like, cashews can be very high histamine. There's certain nuts that are. And so I think for Taylor, why nuts and seeds was such a big deal is he does have a little bit of a histamine gut when you look at his pattern on the GI map. And so as I educated him around his GI map and said like, okay, this is why nuts flare you up, he was able to fully eliminate them. And guys, nuts are in everything. So as a man, he doesn't like to cut calories because he's got to hit a certain, weight at the gym. Like this is most men. They love training in the gym is how men kind of deal with the world and shut their minds off sometime. Like the gym is crucial. I mean, for women, it can be too, but I do find that most men need to go to the gym. It's like what keeps them sane. So to go to the gym, you have to have enough calories, right? And whey protein is a big one for Taylor. He loves, that he feels good on it. Like he legit feels good on it. And so, you have this mix of someone doing, nuts and seeds, a lot of whey protein, you know what I mean? Like just to get in certain amount of calories. This is a typical, this isn't just Taylor. I guarantee you talk to most men that train in the gym, like that's what they're doing, right? And so that had to completely change for him. Now he still does the way, and he's 50% better. But what we've determined is it's a quantity thing too, right? So if he
mm,
out on a long day and he forgot to pack a snack and he was hungry, and let's say that his work got delayed a few hours, he would go to the grocery store and just grab like any protein bar that had like 20 or more grams of protein in it because
mm.
thinking protein, right? And then what comes in that bar? All kinds of additional whey protein, additional nuts and seeds. And it's like, no, that you might have been able to get away with your one scoop of whey post workout. But if you keep pounding it on throughout the day, that's where this starts to tip, right? So we've really decided, even though he hasn't gone, let's say, all in. Like Diane, I remember you in the beginning, you were like, I took everything out. I didn't touch a single penny of what I wasn't supposed to touch. Yeah.
Literally nothing.
Yeah. And that is
But I
because
also
you
was not functioning. A lot of times people, in the Optimize Your Gut program, it's really interesting to see, the difference in a Todd, the difference in a Taylor, the difference in, the next person. And it's like, it's how well are you functioning? And if you're functioning okay, you're like, oh, okay, well, I can get by with, a couple of glasses of alcohol, or, I can get, I can still drink a little bit of whiskey here or there. But for me, I was like barely functioning. And so I went all in. And I honestly feel like that's where Todd was too, because, I told you he's so level-headed, is not an over exaggerator, but he literally thought that, this could be the end of his life. That's how bad he felt. When you're in the bed sleeping 23 out of 24 hours, during that 1 hour that you're awake, a minute or two here or there over a day, you start to kind of think like, what's going to happen? And so when he goes back and sort of relives what happened during that time, he's like, you know what? It's not worth it.
Yes.
We actually went out to dinner the other night for JC Kate's birthday, for her 15th birthday. And Todd was like, I'm going to eat the only couple of, like he ate a couple of chips. And that was kind of it. I mean, he just was like, I'm only going to eat the safe stuff. I'm not even going to pretend like they might cook my meat different than everybody else's meat or whatever. He just made the choice not to eat dinner
Yeah.
there. So it kind of, everybody has kind of their baseline and like how well they feel and how much they want to go all in. And because Taylor's still functioning, he's still working out, he's still drinking his workouts and all, I mean, his protein and everything, he may not feel like he has to go all in, right? He's kind of at a different place than me and Todd were.
Well, that's what he literally said last night. He was like, I really don't, I mean, he functions at 100% except for if he takes his shirt off at the gym, right? So, okay, easy fix, just don't take my shirt off at the gym. You know what I mean? Like that he functions so well. And that I just had to point that out for anyone listening. I mean, if you look at Taylor, he eats super well, right? Like he eats all the things. I mean, yeah, he might have like, whey protein, but like, quote unquote, that's healthy for most people. He has nuts and seeds, but that's quote unquote healthy for most people. And, that's where it's like, okay, if we could, this is what we take you through in the Optimize Your Gut program. And this is where even it was interesting when we were chatting last night. He's like, yeah, I didn't do that. I didn't do that step. In our program, we teach you about journaling because first of all, we know with Taylor, it's about the quantity, but you lose thought of that as the day goes on. Like you forget that you took this bite, you forget that you ate that. And so had he journaled to see like, okay, I tipped the scale on this ingredient, as the day went on, like then you get to trial and error, be like, what if I only had half of that? Okay, let's go a week where I only had half of that quantity. What does my skin look like? Okay, what if I had a fourth of that quantity? So like the journaling is key. And that's honestly like we preach so much about that in the program because it makes such a difference. And so I'm proud of him because he's 50% better, and I'm proud of him because he sees where he can improve, right?
Mm.
And what you said is really the people that get the most success out of our program are the little mini Dianas that are like, no, I'm done living this way. Like I literally can't live this way anymore, so I'm going all in. And that is the different. I feel like people that clients that we've treated over the years is you see health means it's a different definition for everyone,
It
right?
is. And we talk about that all the time. Like I love, when you will just have like a consult with somebody or something and, you're kind of coaching them and you're like, I just had to meet her where she was. Like she's not ready to go all in, or he's still eating this and he feel like he can't do that, or, whatever. And you're telling me about one of our clients or whatever. And I love that about you, that you're like, I'm just meeting them where they are. So we have the Todds, we have the Taylors, we have the Dianas that go through it. And we just kind of meet you where you are and try to teach you, kind of coach you through this balance, and whatever that balance looks like for you. And so I love that about our program and about you, and when you do those coaching sessions and stuff. And so one thing that I do want to mention, like if somebody suspects they have alpha gal, or they had it or whatever, or if they're just kind of interested in general in what Todd's experiencing. So, you know, red meat, beef, pork, lamb, bison, those kind of things. That is something he's totally avoiding, with the exception of him eating off my fork that one time, right? Um, and then you have to watch for hidden things, like even just hidden ingredients in supplements. It can even be gelatin that, like, if you eat a gummy or something like that. So we try to look for doing vegetarian capsules. Um, do research, look into the different supplements and things that you might take. One of the things, Todd, there's so much research about creatine right now and how beneficial it can be for men, for women, for cognitive function, for muscle building, so many things. And so that's one thing that Todd's really passionate about. And so we had to do quite a bit of digging to make sure that he that we could find a creatine, and we did find one from Thorne. So if anybody's interested in that, reach out to me. I can share with you what the specific creatine that he's taking that has not caused him any kind of reaction, and I really feel like has almost helped him, have a little bit of a boost when he's working out and how he feels. So, just continuing to look for those things. Some people even have a difficult time with dairy because of course where it's derived. And so all kinds of different things can be just hidden. And so you have to really do some research and look into that a little bit. So um even sometimes natural flavors. I did want to mention that one too. That was kind of in my notes to say that natural flavors, we don't know what that is a lot of times. So you do have to kind of be careful with that. So we really try to focus mostly for him on chicken and turkey. And I'm working to, he's not a fish eater, but I'm working to try to get him to introduce that. Of course, we eat eggs. He eats eggs quite a bit. And getting some protein in some of those different ways as well. So eating out is something that we don't do a whole lot of. We're trying to eat at home. So I would suggest for people, if they're struggling with, whether it's alpha gal or whether it's gut dysfunction, and they don't know what it is or whatever, eating out is just so tough because you have no idea what they're putting into the food. You have no idea, if they're cooking it in different vegetable oils or canola oils, or, what it is that they're cooking the meats in, what seasonings they're putting on. So you have no way of doing a journal. So even if you were trying to journal, when you go out to eat, it's so hard to do that. You can't figure out what it is, right? And when you're cooking for yourself at home, that's when you can really do the journaling, and you can pinpoint like, hey, I ate a big old thing of onions, and with like let's say you put it in Brussels sprouts or something like that, then you would be like, okay, now I can narrow it down to it's literally either onions or Brussels sprouts. So guess what? Next, you can figure out what it is then. um so of course, one thing that we have done, thankfully we haven't had to use, is, I mean, we do have an EpiPen for him. I mean, I don't expect, it so far it doesn't seem like he's that reactive to things, but that might be something, that you would want to talk to your doctor to, and have kind of as an emergency plan if you wanted to. But we're just going to kind of keep plugging away at this, taking his multivitamin, doing those peptide injections and things, and making sure and boost his immune system. We'll rerun his blood work. I'll share with you guys here on the podcast too, how his progress, is going, and especially once we start to do any kind of reintroduction or whatever, I'll definitely be sure and share that as well. Anything you wanted to add, Angela? Thanks for sharing with us about Taylor too, because a lot of our customers and clients have a problem, that histamine, that rash, that reaction. And so, that's when we're like, you got to go back to the gut, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I enjoyed sharing today. Because I feel like you said, healing is not linear. And so just to see that, even with Taylor's story, I mean, he is seeing 50% improvement. And so that's okay. And some people will hold that at that 50% for a while until they're ready to say, like, okay, I'm ready for the next 50%. So this is all this is all amazing progress, I feel like, in our eyes, right? And I would say lastly for Todd, if anyone else has alpha gal, it's always not just about eliminating, like you had mentioned, his multi. It's so important because think about how he's not eating red meat, and how much nutrients he's not getting because he's not eating the red meat. And so for people out there that have alpha gal, it's not just like, hey, I just stopped eating red meat, I'm fine. You know what I mean? It's like, no, you're missing a big chunk of nutrients there because you eliminated red meat. So now,
Yeah, I mean, B vitamins, right? It's like, are we making sure that you have plenty of, folate, B vitamins, and those kind of things. So, yeah, I mean, making sure this is when supplements are important, right? It's that supplementation to support. That's what supplements are for, to support any deficiencies that you may have. But that is where you still have to do a little bit of digging, though, to make sure that it's the right type of supplement that you're supporting with.
Yeah, checking the labels, checking your prescription medications. A
Mm,
lot of times, if you guys don't know, your prescription medications are derived, or like the binders within them could be mammalian,
mm.
products. And so sometimes asking the pharmacist that question.
Yeah. I'll
And
even throw out, since you're talking about prescription medications, one of the things, some of our people that are highly reactive to gluten, I would
Mhm.
also say, check what's in your prescription medications, because sometimes that is hidden in there as well.
Yeah, so that's why they have compounding pharmacies out there, if you guys don't know, that you can get your medications compounded with, non-fillers or fillers that are not gluten-based or mammalian-based, so there are ways to get around that if that's you. But I hope people take a lot of these tips and advice if it applies to you, or a loved one that or just keep it handy for a rainy day when something comes up, and you never know, it might apply to you in the future. But you know um, just remember, it's our job to stay curious about all of these things. That's what helps us grow through it, right? Is don't see any of this as a negative. We see it all as positive. We stay curious about it, and it helps us kind of lean into this Gut Girls community together, and continue to strive for good health. So,
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I
thanks
hope.
everybody for joining us today. And
Yes.
I hope you will stay tuned and catch us on the next episode.
Catch you later.
The information provided on this podcast, including all episodes, show notes, and related content, is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice and should not be used to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. The views expressed by the host and guest of the Gut Girls podcast are their own and do not reflect the official policy or position of Gut Girls LLC or any other affiliated organizations. While we are trained health professionals and certified health coaches, we are not acting in a licensed clinical capacity on this platform. Any recommendations made on this podcast, including those related to diet, supplements, lifestyle, and lab testing, are general wellness strategies intended for educational use. Always consult with your licensed healthcare provider before implementing any information heard here, especially if you have a medical condition, are taking prescription medications, or are under medical supervision. By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this content as medical advice to treat yourself or others. Neither Gut Girls LLC nor the podcast hosts or any guests shall be held liable for any damage, loss, or injury caused by the use of this information.